Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great day. I just want to talk to you today about a common condition that a lot of people with complex chronic illness and even the general population go through, and that is benzodiazepine drug withdrawal. So if you guys are like me, you were probably prescribed a benzo because you couldn't sleep at night, because you had anxiety, or because your brain was on fire from chronic Lyme disease, mold toxicity, or another condition. So these are very effective drugs for restoring sleep. They're very effective for controlling anxiety and for reducing brain inflammation in the short term. In the long term, they actually make all of these problems worse. Okay, so there are people that tolerate benzos really well, and you'll find these people, and they can take them for years and nothing happens to them, and they can get off of them easily without any repercussions. And if you think you're one of those people, that's great. But I just want to tell you that there are many other people, and it's not a small percentage of people who try to get off these drugs after taking them for a period of weeks or months or even years, and they go through severe withdrawal symptoms. And if you're one of those people, I just want to tell you, my heart goes out to you because I went through benzo drug withdrawal 3 times. And so the first time I took benzos, I was on them for about 6 months, and it took me another 6 months to get off of them. And the reason I couldn't go faster is because I had severe life-threatening symptoms if I tried to do that. The second time I took benzos, I was on them for about a year, and so it took me about a year to get off of them. However, the third time I was on them for perhaps 6 months. And when I tried to get off of them in a shorter amount of time, like the other 2 tapers I did, I couldn't. It took me 3 years. Because if I tried to go faster, I suffered life-threatening symptoms. And what do I mean by that? My blood pressure would spike. It would go to like 190 over, what was it? I can't remember, but it was super, super high. And so that was one thing that would happen. My heart would race. I'd get chest pains. I'd get GI distress. I'd develop severe depression and fatigue, and I would have thoughts like I didn't want to live anymore. And I've never been suicidal, but benzos can make a lot of people suicidal. And I definitely had those thoughts like, I don't want to be here, my life is over. And so if you guys are going through benzo withdrawal and you're having these thoughts, I just want to tell you it's normal, absolutely common to have these kind of thoughts, to have these despairing thoughts. But if you're starting to feel suicidal, then you need to stop the taper. You need to slow it down until you have thoughts that are more manageable. Now, I just want to say that no matter how slow you go in a benzo taper, if you're prone to withdrawal, chances are you are going to battle some depression. You're going to battle fatigue and insomnia and other symptoms that are common to the benzo drug withdrawal syndrome. But I just want to tell you, first of all, if you're having those thoughts, they're going to pass. I promise you they're going to pass. And when I was going through my benzo tapers, and by the way, I was doing my 3rd benzo taper right after my husband passed. And I was alone in Dallas during the pandemic, and it was extremely difficult because not only was I going through the loss of him, but I was alone and coming off a drug at the same time. But I knew I had to come off of it because it was causing very serious symptoms, and so I knew I had to start a taper. But I did a water titration taper, and I highly recommend this to any of you who are sensitive and trying to come off benzos, rather than trying to, let's say, cut your pills or lower it by 10% and then just taking 10% off of the pill itself. And if you have a medication that's in a capsule, obviously you can't do that. So one way that you can do a benzo taper is by dissolving your medication in a beaker of water. And then what you do is you get some syringes in which you draw out tiny increments of the solution every day. And so let's say you start out with 150 milliliters of the solution. You might draw out 1 milliliter every night for, what would that be, 150 days. So, or it might be even less than that. Or you might draw out a milliliter and then hold at that dose for a few days or even a week. And it really depends on the person. So there are a lot of different guidelines out there about how to do a benzo drug taper. And on a lot of benzo forums, you'll see that they recommend tapering your drug by, let's say, 5 to 10% a month. And as you get closer to the end of your taper, you may have to go even slower. But I also feel like God can help you in this. If you trust God to expedite things for you, then I think you can accelerate your taper sometimes. And so God actually did this for me, because when I got to the most difficult part of my last taper, He actually enabled me to accelerate it. And the reason that happened was because I did a fast for, I want to say it was about a week, and I was fasting for God to supernaturally help me get off the drug more quickly. And I believe He did, because the last part of the taper, which should have taken me another 6 months, I think it only took me like a month or two, but it still took a long time because I didn't actually do that until toward the end of the taper. But I was like, God, I'm so tired of this. I need to get off this drug now. And it seems that He honored my request. And so I just want to say, God can supernaturally enable you to get off benzos. And if you have faith for that, you can do it. I want to say though, be careful, because if God is not in it and you try to get off a drug cold turkey and you know that you're prone to drug withdrawal, you can suffer life-threatening symptoms, and people have ended up in the hospital from tapering benzo drugs too quickly. And so really think about that. But when you do a water titration, you'll still likely go through some withdrawal, but it won't be life-threatening. It will be manageable. And so I want to encourage you guys, if you feel led to do your taper that way, then do it. Or ask God how He wants you to do the taper. He might say you have to just get off it cold turkey, that He'll support you in that. But you want to make sure you're really hearing from Him. Now, I just want to say, when I was tapering off benzos, there were a few things that I took and which I did to help me through the taper. And so, as many of you guys know, insomnia, depression, fatigue, chest pain, GI distress are some of the most common symptoms of drug withdrawal. Also, racing heart, tachycardia, high blood pressure, things like that. And some things you can do to mitigate those symptoms are, first and foremost, obviously go extremely slow on your taper. Most doctors, by the way, don't know how to taper benzos, and so it's very dangerous, because a lot of doctors in the United States and probably around the world are having their patients taper off benzos very quickly when they shouldn't be doing that. And so if you find that that's the case for you, you'll have to find a source. You'll have to find a doctor who's going to understand how to do tapers and who's willing to prescribe a long-term supply of benzos so that you can come off of them safely. So one of the things that I did, which helped me to come off benzos, in addition to doing a slow taper, was to use a brain entrainment device. And what these devices do is slowly entrain your brain wave patterns down into a delta sleep wave pattern. And so regardless of the cause of your insomnia, brain entrainment devices, or neurofeedback devices as they are called, can really help you in this. And so ClearMind is one company that makes really good brain entrainment devices, neurofeedback devices. And these can be expensive, but it depends on what you're going for, because there are devices you can purchase which just feed frequencies into your brain, and they don't get feedback from your brain in order to create a signal, a specific response. Whereas there are other devices that will read your brainwave frequencies, and then they will create a signal or create frequencies and feed those back into your brain based on the input from your brain. And those are a little bit more expensive, but you can get both kinds of devices like that on the ClearMind. I forget what their website is. I think it's clearmindcenter.com. And there are other companies that make neurofeedback devices, and this can be really, really helpful for coming off benzos. The other thing you might do is take something like phenibut, which works similar to a benzo in your body, but it's a natural substance that also helps to modulate your GABA receptors. Now, there's controversy within benzo communities about whether to take GABA modulating substances, but I found phenibut to be really helpful when I was tapering off a benzo. And you can get phenibut from Russia. You can get it from pharmacies there. It used to be sold in the United States. It isn't anymore, unfortunately, but you can still order it from certain pharmacies there. If you do a Google search, they should come up, and it's spelled Phenibut, phenibut. And again, it works on GABA receptors in the brain, but you want to just use that at your discretion. I would say ask your doctor's advice, but most doctors don't really know about benzo tapering. So you could get input and feedback from a benzo community, but just be careful who you listen to there, because There are a lot of so-called experts, and we are all really different and respond to different things. So I just want to throw that in there just as a disclaimer, because if someone comes back to me and says, well, I tried Phenibut, it made me worse, I just want to say, you've got to ask God, above all, how he wants you to do this, whether he wants you to take Phenibut or another substance. So another thing you can do is take other medications to help you sleep. And obviously you want to take a medication that's going to be non-addictive. And so I recommend low-dose doxepin, which is an antidepressant. But if you take just tiny doses of this antidepressant, I think it can help you to sleep while you're tapering off benzos. Also doxylamine, which is marketed under the brand name Unisom, is a really good one. But I just want to warn you, Unisom now makes products that contain both doxylamine and diphenhydramine. Diphenhydramine has been linked to dementia. It's the ingredient that's contained in Benadryl, and I don't recommend Benadryl at all. I wouldn't also take doxylamine long term if you don't have to, but in the short term while you're tapering off benzos, I think it can be a really good choice of medication. Also ketotifen, which is an antihistamine and can also help you sleep, that's a really good one, and it also doesn't affect your memory or cognition, unlike doxylamine or diphenhydramine. And finally, you may want to try DSIP, which is delta sleep inducing peptide. Now this is an injection that you give yourself, and you can get DSIP at a lot of compounding pharmacies. You can get it at research pharmacies, and you basically use an insulin needle to inject yourself with it. But I've noticed that at higher doses it can affect your brain chemistry, so you might just want to take a tiny dose of it, because when you're coming off benzos, your brain chemistry is already really affected. So that's one you could try, but just be careful with it. And in my book that I wrote in 2020, Beyond a Glass of Milk and a Hot Bath, I share some other solutions for healing from insomnia. But the things that I just mentioned, I think are particularly helpful if you're coming off of benzodiazepines. And so finally, the last thing you want to do when coming off benzos is to keep your mind active as much as you can, because so that it doesn't fall into negative thinking, so it doesn't fall into toxic thinking, thoughts of hopelessness, despair, and death, which are really common in withdrawal. So you want to get out, get sunshine, exercise, try to occupy your mind as much as you can, even if you don't feel well enough to do much. You want to try to engage with people, even if you don't feel like it. Anything you can do to distract your mind is a really good idea. And I realize that when you do a benzo taper, you can feel so bad that you really can't do much at all. And I was one of those people. I was bedridden during parts of my tapers, but I still tried to get out and take walks, get sunshine. I tried to be around people, and I maintained a healthy diet, which is also really, really important. You want to keep sugars out of your diet, carbs out of your diet. Actually, I want to say if they're healthy carbs, that's okay. But some people will do better on, let's say, a paleo diet, while other people might do better on a Mediterranean diet or a metabolic typing diet. But your diet can also play a major role in your mood and mental function. So I want to encourage you to stay on a good diet when you're doing a benzo taper. And finally, I just want to say, guys, this will pass. I promise it will pass. I've gone through it several times. I'll never go through it again, but I made it through, and I overcame the dark, despairing thoughts with the help of God and Jesus Christ. And so I just want to encourage you as well to cultivate a relationship with God. Ask him to help you get through this. And who knows, he may just supernaturally deliver you from benzo drug withdrawal. He can supernaturally restore your GABA receptors. He can supernaturally modulate and balance your biochemistry. But cultivate that relationship, because he'll also give you the strength to get through your taper, which is what you really need. He'll give you encouragement. And so I just want to leave you with that. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. So I hope this blessed you today, and I'll talk to you all again soon.